Vicarious traumatization or exposure happens through a drip, drip, drip. It's almost like a toxic radiation. And it can manifest itself through, general burnout, loss of faith in the good in the world, that kind of idea, or kind of a general questioning around, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for?
Perhaps there's more risky behaviour relating to sexual behaviour, relating to drugs, relating to things that you wouldn't perhaps usually do.
I would start worrying about a colleague if they were avoiding work, withdrawing from social activities, or perhaps if they're plunging themselves back into it and not perhaps processing it, not standing back and reflecting on what had happened. And I think as well, being aware of what else is going on in their life.
People need to be aware that vicarious trauma is very much a real thing. It can happen to anybody, and people need to know how to recognise the signs in themselves and in their colleagues.
So I think there's a number of things you can do to help protect against the risk of vicarious trauma. Recognise the purpose and the meaning and the kind of motivation behind why you're doing this.
Being aware of the fact that repeated exposure is key.
So first of all, limit it either in terms of time or in terms of space or in terms of the way you view it.
For example, if you're having to watch some pretty graphic footage, is turn off autoplay.
Never play a video with sound on for the first time. Never watching a video in full screen, I think, becomes really important.
But also workflow. Spreadsheets can actually be your friend. You can put down what you've already seen or heard so that somebody in your team doesn't necessarily then have to see or hear the same thing.
Create this network around you of support, and wherever that can be found. Hopefully in organizations it's a lot more easily found, but for those freelancers and consultants out there, I think it can also be found through colleagues who are doing similar work.
If you're seeing something or hearing something or witnessing something that's difficult, try to find somebody you trust to say, look, that was really tough.
You might have certain trauma triggers. So if you're working within a team, perhaps people being aware of that, you're not necessarily going to be the person that's going to put your hands up to do a story that's close to home. As journalists, we go towards things. We don't shy away from anything. What we should consider is how much of a risk, a long-term risk, are we putting ourselves forward for?
If you're working from home, try if you can to not kind of see this material and this image in a place where you might, be watching entertainment, for instance, or you might be in your bed or in your bedroom.
You have to factor in being able to not have to sit there for hours on end, being able to go away and have chocolate and cake or whatever takes your fancy. Just because you're in a professional team doesn't mean that having a break is an unprofessional thing to do.
Find time to have conversations. News is busy, journalists are busy. It's almost more important in a heightened, traumatic news event or environment to do that.
Create a culture where it's okay to talk about the challenges of reporting on conflict remotely.
The one basic thing, check in with your team. Are you okay? 3 simple words.
And nobody's going to get good stories out if they're in the process of, burning out. So I think it's in all of our interests. It's in our economic interests as news organizations to look after all our staff.
You do not need to be ashamed of anything that you're covering and saying, actually, it does affect me.
Because we're only good journalists if we're resilient journalists, and we're only resilient journalists if we spot what's going on in us and other people.
Headlines Network exists to create environments where everyone in our journalism industry feels safe to acknowledge, support and achieve good mental health at work. We have worked with the mental health charity Mind to bring you this video. This project has been made possible with the support of the Google News Initiative.